I'm here to talk to you about happiness. Obviously, if you're here already, then it's a topic you're interested in. But it's not a topic that seems to have been predictable for most of us. Sometimes we find happiness, sometimes we fail to find it, sometimes we're given amazing experiences and we stay still a little grumpy through them. Happiness, as per an engineering, mathematical, logical view, is highly predictable. It is so predictable that it follows a math equation. If you understand how happiness works and where unhappiness comes from, you can manage your thoughts, manage your actions, develop your skills so that happiness becomes part of every day. In this course, I will start with some of the wrong assumptions about happiness. I'll show you the predictable side of it in the happiness equation and explain to you, as per that equation, what happiness truly is, what is fun and pleasure and joy, and what is unhappiness. When we know that, we can develop predictable techniques, consistent techniques that can lead you to happiness. We're going to talk about the happiness flow chart. We're going to talk about a deal that you can have with your brain. And then we're going to take you to the mind gym. In the gym, we will develop your skills of happiness almost like an athlete. I'm going to expose your brain to you a little bit so that you recognize how your brain sometimes morphs the truth that is supposed to make you happy into creations of its own that lead you to be unhappy. When we're done with discussing the impact of thought on your brain, we will go into a deeper topic, an illusion that affects all of us, the illusion of time. We will try to decipher how time fools us into believing that life is made of past, present, and future, when in reality, all we have access to is life right here, right now. We will then talk about stress and how to remove stress from your life so that you can leave space for happiness to come in. We're then going to talk about the illusion of control, one of the biggest illusions of professionals in the workplace, an illusion that is known to affect senior managers and executives in a way that may lead them to a little bit more success, but in the process deprive them of their happiness. We're also going to dive deep into how to find happiness in an uncertain world that is about to embark upon us with the advancements of technology and artificial intelligence. Happiness at work is not a luxury. It's part of what every manager and executive should provide as an environment so that the best of their talent stays and the numbers and performance keeps growing. At the end of our course, we're going to discover that happiness is within your own hands. You are in charge to develop your skills, to tackle life in certain ways that will lead you to happiness a lot more often. In brief, happiness, believe it or not, will always be found in the truth. This course is about helping you see that truth. I'm Mo Gaudat, and this is my BBC Maestro course on happiness. I can't believe I'm here with you today to talk to you about happiness. It's been such a long journey that I had to take through my personal experiences that got me here. I could tell you that I have lived two full lives. I started my life in Egypt. I spent the first 25 years of my life in Egypt, where I sort of was exposed quite extensively to the Eastern cultures and mentalities of the world. And then by age 25, I moved along a path that took me all the way to the height of career success. At the end of that path, I was the chief business officer of Google X. having spent 12 years at Google, started half of Google's businesses worldwide, and eventually ended up responsible for integrating the innovation arm of Google with the whole world. In that successful career, a career that most people would dream of, for the first part, I was mostly miserable. In my late 20s, believe it or not, earlier than most people, I managed to find everything that has been promised to me as a reason for happiness. I made so much money. I had the beautiful house with the swimming pool. I had a wonderful woman that loved me and gave me 2 amazing children. And I was clinically depressed. I was unable to find my happiness despite the fact that life gave me everything that we think leads to happiness. Often I would pour money and resources on that problem. It's like, if I'm not happy, let me go on a fancy vacation or buy an expensive car or buy fancy clothes. Maybe, as they promised me, this will lead me back to happiness. And I failed over and over and over, which made me even more depressed. Because if I can't solve it with all of those resources, how can I solve it? One morning on a Saturday, the grumpy old me was reading an email or looking at an analysis report of a stock or something as my little daughter walked into the room excited about all of the things that we were going to do that day. She was bubbling with life. She was so excited about doing this and then going to get popcorn and cotton candy. And I looked at her as the grumpy old me and I said, "Can we please be serious for a minute?" What serious? She was 5 years old. I saw with my own eyes as my daughter's heart broke. I remember it vividly until today that I locked my room and I looked in the mirror and I hated the person that I saw. My unhappiness was not just affecting me, it was affecting those that I loved the most. When I made that realization, I decided I did not want to be that person anymore. All of the success, all of the blessings in life, and I stayed grumpy and I hurt those that I loved. And so I went out and did the only thing I know. I read every book I could get my hands on. I watched every documentary. I attended courses. I attempted to find the path to happiness, and I failed over and over. I failed because the language in which those courses, those books was written, was not the language that my highly mathematical, physics-oriented, computer science-oriented brain was willing to accept. Anytime someone told me to meditate, I would go like, why? Explain to me how the machine works before you tell me how to use it. That stubbornness took me 4 years until I found my first clue to happiness. An equation, believe it or not, that actually describes how happiness behaves. An equation that informed a model that became my lifestyle, my savior back to happiness. Throughout that journey, I had a stronger mind, if you want, than a heart. My heart was my wonderful son, Ali. Ali was born a tiny little Zen monk. He knew happiness instinctively. He rarely ever cried, and whenever he spoke so much wisdom that even I, the older, more successful father, had to sit and listen. When Ali was 16, I remember vividly that I told one of my best friends, when I grow older, I want to become like Ali. This boy would sit and listen to me as I tried to explain my findings in equations and logic and understanding of how happiness works. And he would entertain me. He would smile and say, "Oh, that's very interesting, Papa." And he would ask me a couple of questions as if he's interested. I knew he was entertaining me, but I felt so proud. And then eventually he would say, "Well, you could have just asked me. I mean, we humans with a heart, this is how we see it." And he would explain happiness to me, to my logical brain, the way the heart sees it. Together, we brought that model of happiness that worked for me first, and then as I shared it with all my loved ones, with my friends, with my colleagues at work, it worked for them too. It took me 12 years from the moment I broke my daughter's heart to the moment where I found myself happy, regardless of what life threw my way. But then when I got there, it seems that life had another plan. Life tested my ability to find happiness with perhaps the hardest test a loving father could ever face. When Ali was 21, he was this tall, handsome, beautiful, wise, loving young man, the pride, the true pride of a father. He called us, he at the time was studying in Boston, and he said, "I feel obliged to come and visit you before I start my US tour." He was the bass guitarist of a reasonably successful band at the time. Of course, we loved him so much. Aya, my daughter, was visiting too, so we said, "Absolutely, we'll buy you tickets. Please come and visit us." 4 days after Ali arrived, he had a belly pain, an appendix that was inflamed. And we took him to a hospital. They prescribed an appendectomy, a very simple operation that would normally take 4 to 5 minutes. And sadly, in the case of Ali, there were mistakes made, 5 mistakes in a row. And within 4 hours, due to predictable human error that wasn't fixed properly, we lost Ali. After the best hug of my life, the highlight of my life, right before he went into the operating room, 4 hours later, I felt that everything was taken away from me. If you've ever hugged Ali once, I promise you, you wouldn't blame me if I had closed my door and hit my head against the wall until the day I left this world. But I didn't. Somehow, a couple of days after Ali left, my daughter came to my room and said, "Papa, Ali had a dream that he only told me about. And that dream was that he was everywhere and part of everyone." As I think about that now and I remember all of the spiritual development I've had since then, I realize that in many spiritual teachings, everywhere and part of everyone is the definition of death. To leave, to depart from the limitations of your physical form and be free to be anywhere in space-time. He had that dream, and then he told Aya, "I felt so good that I didn't want to be back in my body." When Aya told me this a couple of days after Ali left, I was blurry. My mind was not seeing clear, and so all I can remember is that being the powerful executive that took Google across half of the world's operation, that I took it as a sort of a target, a quota. I remember saying, as soon as Aya said this, I said, "Habibi, consider it done. I'll make you everywhere and part of everyone. I know how to reach billions of people." That was the thought in my brain. And suddenly my fate moved from hitting my head against the wall, grieving, to actually realizing that there is something that boy taught me, that if I shared with 10 million people, I would actually, through 6 degrees of separation with enough time, keep his essence alive everywhere and part of everyone. And so 17 days after Ali died, I sat down to write about the most unusual topic for a grieving father. I sat down to write about happiness. I wrote a book that was called Solve for Happy, and Solve for Happy was translated into 33 languages, almost as if the universe wants Ali to be everywhere and a part of everyone. 33 languages, bestseller in many of them, and in no time at all, within around 8 weeks from the release of the book, my videos were going viral all over the internet, 187 million views, where 10 million happy was quickly achieved. At that time, I realized that my first life as a Google executive was just preparing me, leading me into this life. And in this life, over the last few years, I wrote more books, about happiness, about artificial intelligence and the future of humanity in the age of the rise of the machines. How can we find our own happiness with so much uncertainty and progress? I started a podcast, Slow Mo, which became top-rated across the globe in the happiness and well-being space. All of it has been my effort to fulfill my upgraded mission when we've achieved 10 million happy, to reach 1 billion people before I leave this life with a message of happiness that drives them to find their own happiness, a mission that I called 1 billion happy. My effort today is to share with you what I've learned about happiness, hopefully to make you one of the 1 billion. But promise me, if I teach you something today that will make you a little happier, to become part of the mission by sharing it with others. Teach 2 people, tell them to come and learn so that they tell 2 people who will tell 2 people, and within no time at all, that movement will spread and we will reach 1 billion happy. If there is one mission that our world needs most today, it's a mission of happiness. We live in a world of uncertainty and constant challenges, despite the progress that humanity made. You've arrived here because you know that this is your priority. Help me make this a priority for others. Help me reach 1 billion happy. The one thing that we all have in common is that we all want to be happy. Yet this beautiful feeling seems to be quite elusive. Many of us spend a lifetime doing things, buying things, being with others, trying to find it wherever they can find it, and it still seems to be unpredictable. Sometimes you do what you're told you're supposed to do to find happiness, go all the way halfway across the world to a vacation somewhere, and as you land there, your mind starts to bring back how annoying your boss is, or what is difficult when you're going to go back home, and you still can't find that feeling. Some of us will be told to buy certain fashion items, maybe an expensive car, and you sit in that car and you still can't find happiness. We go to happiness gurus and meditation teachers and yoga teachers, and they make it seem that happiness is complex. It's a bit like when you go to a personal trainer that will make you think that to be fit, you have to exercise this very specific muscle in that very specific way, and it has to be an hour every time, and you have to eat this way, when in reality, fitness is really not that complicated. Fitness is make fitness your priority, eat healthy. Unless you want to be Mr. Olympia or Miss Bikini champion, being fit is not that complicated. And so maybe happiness is also not that complicated. When we really think deeply about it, the reason why happiness seems to be so elusive is because we make the wrong assumptions about happiness. We start from a wrong assumption, and so it doesn't really matter how much you try, eventually you might find yourself in the wrong place. So I want to bring to your attention 3 wrong assumptions about the topic of happiness. Perhaps if we can correct those, we could find a path that is not only going to lead you to happiness, but will lead you to happiness predictably, so that every time you follow that path, you can get to the same beautiful feeling that we all seek. The 3 wrong assumptions that we are made to believe about happiness are: 1, happiness is a state to attain. It's almost as if we're supposed to be unhappy all the time, and then when we put in the effort or change our behavior or buy something or do something, then we get to happiness. It's almost as if happiness is the exception. The second wrong assumption is that things and activities and conditions, if you want, are a prerequisite to that happiness. And the third wrong assumption is that happiness is unpredictable. That, yes, you may apply those conditions to your life, but that will not always lead to happiness. Sometimes you're going to be seeking that handsome, beautiful, tall partner, and you chase that in your life, and then when you actually achieve it, it's the reason you become miserable. That unpredictability is the wrong assumption. It's the assumption that happiness will not happen even if you do the work. Now, let's correct those assumptions. Assumption one is that happiness is a state to attain. Now, it doesn't take a genius, honestly. You don't need to have a PhD in science to recognize that every child you've ever seen, every infant, if they are fed, if they are safe, if they are loved, if there is no loud noises around them, if they are given their very basic needs for survival, their state is happy. Every single one of us, including you, when you were an infant, when you were given what you need, not all of the distractions that we are made to believe that we want, just what you need was enough to make you lie on your back, or, look at the ceiling, play with your toes, and giggle. Truly and honestly, no Xbox required, no fancy car, no handsome partner, nothing from outside you was needed. All you needed was your basic needs for survival. As we grow older and we go into the modern world tries to convince us that happiness is to be attained with certain conditions. An assumption that perhaps is conditioned within us because of the advertising industry, the marketing industry, because of the comparisons we make to our neighbors and our friends, because of all that it is that we are supposed to buy and acquire, because nobody can really sell you the feeling of, hey, by the way, you have your basic needs as a child, so you're supposed to be happy. That wouldn't make you buy much. So we have to tell you that something is missing in your life, that without that fancy dress, you're not good enough. And when you get the fancy dress, you'll be happy. But the truth is, how often have you actually received what you were looking for only to move the goalposts further? Only to say, nah, it's not exactly what I want, I need another one. Or it's not exactly the right color, I may be needing a different color. And how often is it that we actually get what we think will make us happy and still remain unhappy? On the other hand, how often is it that you see people in Latin America or in Africa or in the poorer countries of the world who seem to have nothing at all, and yet their state is happy? They get enough to eat, to feed their family, and they spend the evening dancing or laughing with their friends without having to struggle with all of the things that they're told they need, but they don't have. Now, the reality of the two assumptions is we are born happy. Happiness is our innate state. It's our default setting. It's almost like when you take your mobile phone out of the box for the first time. It works perfectly. It swipes smoothly, all of the apps are working, the language setting is clear, and then you start to add stuff to it. You start to install weird apps on it. And instead of the phone working, it goes out of its default state and it starts to become clunky. Being unhappy is not the nature of the phone. Being unhappy is because of the behaviors, because of the conditions, because of the expectations that we've added to the phone. Mostly in the modern world, our default state is happy as a child. And then we go out of that default state because we're seeking other things. And as humans, we're told in the modern world that success is more important than happiness. So we go out there and we seek success. And we're capable beings. When you seek success, you do the things that will lead you to success, and you may achieve success or strive to achieve it, and as a result, you lose happiness. The default is being happy. Now, look back at that child. That child is only happy when it has its basic needs for survival, when its basic needs are met. But so many of us will say, oh, but the child fusses and cries. And of course, if you've ever raised a child, you know that there are times when they cry and they're unhappy about life as it seems. And of course they do, but they do when there is a reason for unhappiness. The correction of assumption two is that happiness is not to be acquired by all of those things. Happiness is simply the absence of unhappiness. You look at that child when the diaper, or the nappy as they call it in the UK, when the nappy gets wet, the child will cry. When the child feels hungry, the child will cry. Feed the child or change the nappy, and the child will go back to happiness. Our default state of happiness is interrupted by a reason. If you remove the reason, what's left behind is happy. So this, to me, in my story of seeking happiness, was a very, very, very life-defining moment. Because for a long time, when I felt unhappy in my younger years, I attempted to find that happiness by going and getting things from outside me, when in reality, all I needed to do was to remove the reasons that were making me unhappy. It doesn't actually matter if you go to the fanciest 5-star hotel in the furthest resort in the most beautiful, sea, view and a jungle, and whatever it is that you put yourself through, it doesn't matter. It wouldn't make you happier if there is still a reason for your unhappiness, if your partner is still annoying you, or if work is still stressful, or if you know for a fact that there is something that you're struggling with. As long as that remains, happiness will not be found. So to be able to actually find happiness, what you need to do is to work on the reason that's making you unhappy. And perhaps when you do, you wouldn't even need to go to an island. Perhaps when you do, suddenly you find that calm and peaceful contentment. When I discovered that as a young engineer, that happiness is the absence of unhappiness, that there are no things I need from outside me to find happiness, rather I need to remove what's making me unhappy, most people logically would say, okay, let me write down a list of the things that make me unhappy and try to remove them one by one. But that's not how engineers think. I know it sounds crazy, but at the time, as a software engineer, I told myself, okay, I not only need to remove the things that are making me unhappy, I need to find out what triggers those things. I need to find out if there is an algorithm that actually delivers those reasons. Is there a way I can predict every moment in my life where I will ever be happy and every moment in my life where I will ever be unhappy, and algorithmically almost write a piece of code that predicts those moments in the future so I can solve that happiness issue once and for all? And I know that sounds crazy, but it worked. I attempted to go out there and, like an engineer, reverse engineer happiness, if you want. I wanted to take every moment in my life where I felt happy and try to sort of plot them on a diagram. You know how scientists will take readings from a machine and basically draw all of the random dots and try to find a fitting line between them, because if I could find that fitting line, then that's the equation of happiness. Everything that resides outside that line is unhappiness. And if I can find that, then happiness becomes predictable, the third assumption that we'll talk about in a minute. And so to do that, I used a technique that was called the happy list, a technique that I will encourage you to take a few moments now to experience yourself. At the time, I said, let me find all the moments in my life where I felt happy. Let me try to find the answer to the sentence that starts with, I feel happy when. I feel happy when I have a good cup of coffee. I feel happy when my daughter smiles. I feel happy when I learn something new. Whatever it is that could make me happy, I wrote down. And I remember vividly at the time, I wrote down a list of 92 data points. Before we talk about how those data points took me to understand the happiness equation and exactly how happiness works, maybe you can take 10 minutes and work on your own happy list. If you're here to watch a maestro class about happiness, then by definition you want to be happy, and it's actually quite surprising if you don't know what makes you happy in the first place. Perhaps the first step to find happiness is to write down what makes you happy. So take 10 minutes now, set a timer, paper and pen, and scribble down as many points in your life where you feel happy. Any answer to the statement, I feel happy when. When you come back, we'll talk about some amazing discoveries about that happy list and also show you how that happy list provides us with the information we need to understand how predictable happiness is through its happiness equation. So with your happy list completed, let's just have a few minutes to highlight some observations, 4 of them to be specific. The first for me is that I've done this exercise with probably more than 20,000 people in person in my workshops and so on. And I've always been surprised by how many people are interested in happiness, and yet they don't really know what makes them happy. No, you don't really take the time to sit down and take inventory of what makes you happy. And it's quite something, because I'm sure that while you were writing the happiness list, your happy list made you happy. When you say, I feel happy when my daughter smiles, somehow within you, it brings back memories and moments in your life when your daughter smiled. And that in itself makes you happy. Working on your happy list makes you happy. And so on my first observation, I would encourage you to not make this a one-time practice. I would encourage you to keep your happy list on your phone and really go through it every now and then. Even sometimes when you're feeling down at work or in a commute or whatever, just take your happy list and take a look at it. And it will make you happier in an interesting way. It will remind you of the things that make you happier. The second observation, which I think is really, really a proof that the assumption that happiness comes with certain conditions is wrong, is that idea that nobody has ever written on their happy list, I feel happy when I buy a Ferrari. I've done this exercise when I used to teach workshops with perhaps more than 20,000 people. Nobody ever writes, I feel happy when I win the Nobel Prize, or I feel happy when I become a director. All of those things that the modern world tells us are preconditions for happiness, they don't seem to have any inherent value of happiness in them at all. We acquire them and they don't make us happy. And when we're asked to sit down and reflect and think about our happy list, they don't seem to feature. The third observation is even more interesting, because if you really look at your happy list, please do it now. Look at your happy list and you'll find that most of the things that are on your happy list are so simple, so attainable, that you can bring them into your life at least once a day, at least once a week, let's say, but perhaps once a day, right? So I feel happy when I have a good cup of coffee. Yeah, I wake up every morning and I make the best cup of coffee I can. It makes me happy. It requires that attention from me. I feel happy when my daughter smiles. I send her dirty jokes all the time. My daughter is now 29, so she can laugh about those things. And every now and then, she texts me back a smiley, and my day is made. My life is happy. Now, if you understand that your happy list is so attainable, you might as well start to make decisions around looking at your happy list and perhaps putting a circle around the items that you should start bringing into your life frequently. That in itself will make you feel happier. Remember, however, that when I started to do the exercise around writing my happy list, it was an attempt to understand if there is an equation, an algorithm that describes all of the moments in my life where I felt happy. I was trying to find out what was common between I feel happy when I have a good cup of coffee and I feel happy when my daughter smiles. There seems to be no commonality between them, especially, by the way, which is the fourth observation, that it's not always predictable that when my daughter smiles, I will always be happy. I mean, for example, my daughter back in 8th grade failed mathematics and came home smiling, and I wasn't happy about that. I didn't want her to smile. And so it's interesting. I feel happy when my daughter smiles seems to be a statement, but in reality, it's not always that way. When you look at things from a mathematical point of view, if this is the behavior of a parameter in your equation, you start to tell yourself, oh, in that case, happiness is not just related to that event, my daughter smiling, there must be something else at play. And that is the commonality across all of the moments in your life where you've ever felt happy. You never really felt happy because a certain event took place. That's not how happiness works. You feel happy when the event that took place is how you wanted the event to be. That is the happiness equation. Your happiness is not related to the events in isolation. Your happiness is related to the event minus your expectations of how life should be. So if you want it in an equation format, it's a very simple equation. Your happiness is equal to or greater than the difference between the events of your life and your expectations of how life should be. Now, once you get that, happiness becomes very predictable. Because all of the vagueness around happiness. Why am I not happy when I actually dated the person that I wanted to date? Or why am I not happy when I got that promotion at work? When you really understand, what happens is there is no inherent value of happiness in anything. Rain does not always make you happy and does not always make you unhappy. Rain makes you happy if you want to water your plants or if it's your ex-boyfriend's wedding. You're very happy about rain in that situation, but if it's your wedding or if you want to sunbathe, rain will make you unhappy. It's a comparison between the event, rain, and how you want life to be. Events minus expectations, events minus expectations. Now, believe it or not, if you look at the human brain is capable of solving that equation by comparing the events that it perceives with the expectations of how it wishes life will be up to 60,000 times a day. Believe it or not. Now, those 60,000 times, not necessarily 60, but it will do this at every change of context. We may think that our brains are made to innovate and create iPhones, but at the very, very basic function of our brains, they're constantly solving that equation. Since this video started, you may have looked at every change of context. You sat down and you asked yourself, is this chair comfortable? Is it hurting my back? If it is, comfortable, then events meet expectations, you're okay with the chair. If it isn't, events miss expectations and you're a little concerned about what will happen, right? If you look at me and go like, oh, black t-shirt, bald guy, what do I have to learn from this guy? Does that make you happy or unhappy? Do I waste an hour on him or do I not, right? And then you start to get engaged a little, you compare again and you say, oh, that's interesting, the happy list bit, and so on. Every change of context, we compare events to expectations. If life seems to give us what we want, we're happy. If life seems to miss what we want, we're unhappy. Now, with that in mind, let's get into assumption number 3, which is, why did we think that happiness was unpredictable when it follows such an accurate algorithmic approach? It's because we define happiness wrong. In the modern world that we live in, we mix happiness up with fun, with pleasure, with joyful experiences. And we think that those are happiness when they are not. So let's do this as an engineer would do. Let's define happiness and define all of the other derivatives so that you know the difference between them. Happiness, as per the happiness equation, is events meet or beat your expectations. If events meet or beat your expectations, life is going your way, and accordingly, your brain has nothing to complain about. So you return back to your default state as a child, and your default state as a child is happiness. In the absence of something that your brain found wrong with life, your brain is quiet, you're calm and peaceful and contented. That is the definition of happiness. The definition of happiness is I am calm and peaceful. I'm okay with life as it is. So what are all of those other experiences then? Why is it that we seek to go out for a party on Friday night after a stressful week, or go and run on the treadmill when we feel a little stressed? It's because there are two mechanisms within our body. Calm and peaceful contentment is one. I'm going to define this as happiness. The other are all of those pleasurable experiences that we can engage our physical form in, and I will call those, let's call them fun, but I will also refer to them as the state of escape. Now, they could be fun, positive, and they could be the state of escape, depending on exactly how you use them. Let's understand how this works. You struggle with a tough week at work, you go out to the pub at the end of the week, you have a couple of drinks, there is music, we laugh with your friends. What's happening then is you managed to numb your brain long enough so that it doesn't solve the happiness equation. When you're engaged in that conversation with your friends, you're not thinking about how annoying your boss is. And in that stage, when there is nothing for your brain to discover that contradicts the happiness equation, no events are actually missing its expectations or its awareness of the moment, then you're okay. Your brain is not giving you anything that that it complains about, so you basically go back to your default state as a child, and your default state is happy. The interesting bit then is when you go back home, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, your brain jumps back in and says, hey, hold on, did you try to numb me last night? My boss is annoying. We need to talk about that. There is something that's annoying me, and you go back to unhappiness, right? You jump out, go to the gym, run on the treadmill, and as you're on the treadmill, your brain says, I'm gonna die if I don't take care of this. I need to focus on it. It doesn't solve the happiness equation. It just focuses on you running on the treadmill. You stop thinking about what bothers you. In the absence of a reason for unhappiness, that calm brings you back to your childlike state, and you're happy. The minute you hit the showers, your brain goes back and says, don't try to numb me again. Your boss is annoying. And then you're back to unhappiness. Now, what's the difference between those two states? Is there anything wrong with having fun, by the way? Not at all. But if you understand the biology of how those two states work, you will realize that happiness, calm and peaceful contentment, is associated within our bodies with a hormone known as serotonin. And serotonin is exactly what the happiness equation is about. It basically is a calmer. It is that hormone that allows you to understand, that signals to you that I've scanned the world around me. The world around me seems safe. And so you can now rest and digest. You can relax your muscles and replenish them. You can close your eyes and reflect and maybe even sleep. Everything is safe, is the signal that you're getting when you're at that state of calm and peace. Now, most people don't understand this, but that state, which is known as the parasympathetic nervous system engagement, is as important to your survival as running away from a tiger. Because if you're stressed all the time and you're constantly unhappy about life, you're in a superpower kind of human state, but at the same time, you're switching off your liver function, you're switching off your kidney function, you're switching off everything that you don't need to use in the case of a stressful situation. And over the long term, this is why many of us become ill as a result of stress and unhappiness. It's because we're constantly engaged in a state that is stressed, the sympathetic nervous system engagement, and as a result, we're not able to reflect and relax and rest and do all of those bodily functions. Now, when you go and have fun, when you engage in something that makes your body feel joy in a way that numbs your brain long enough so that you don't solve your happiness equation, the hormone that is secreted in your body is dopamine. And dopamine is very different. Dopamine is a reward hormone. It's not a happiness hormone. It's an excitatory that basically signals to you, I think there is value in what you're doing here. Let's do more of it. I like it. Now, the problem with dopamine is that the more dopamine you have in your blood, the more your brain receptors downregulate. So you don't actually sense dopamine the same way anymore. If it takes you 100 units of dopamine, let's simplify. If it takes you 100 units of dopamine to feel that reward the first time, your brain will say, okay, the norm now is 100. I need 110 next time. And then I need 120. And so this is why you find that people who are highly dependent on fun to find their state of happiness are actually almost addicted to dopamine. If going to a party does not cut it anymore, they'll go to a wilder party. If running on the treadmill does not numb their brain anymore, they'll jump out of an aeroplane and do extreme sports. Now, there is nothing inherently wrong with dopamine. As a matter of fact, all of those positive experiences are wonderful. The thing is, I use fun as intended. The problem with our modern world is that we use fun as a state of escape. we have troubles that are not enabling us to find that calm and peace. And so instead of attending to those troubles, we go to the party. And when we go to the party, we are using dopamine, we're using fun as a painkiller. It's like having a headache, and instead of finding out the reasons for the symptoms that are headaches, we actually try to numb the headache by popping a couple of pills. Eventually, like with dopamine, the effects wear out, and you need to pop a couple of pills more, and then a couple more. And you go from normal strength to extra strength to maximum strength. And as you're doing that, you're really still not attending to the reason that's making you unhappy. Now, there is an alternative way of using fun. And the alternative way is as a supplement, as a vitamin, if you want, right? When you are faced with challenges that are making you unhappy, the right thing to do is to attend to what's making you unhappy, find that state of calm and peaceful contentment so that you are flooded with serotonin, you're calm, you're happy with life, you're okay with life as it is, even if, by the way, if life is a little challenging. And then add fun and pleasure and joy as a supplement to remind you that life is okay and enjoyable. When you do that, you're using fun the right way. When you're escaping to fun instead of finding your happiness, dopamine literally kicks out the serotonin from your blood. You can't have both of them at the same time because one is an excitatory and the other is a calmer. And so when you get addicted to dopamine as your only way to finding that state of not attending to your troubles, you're basically kicking the serotonin out of your blood and unable to find that calm and peace. So we can use the definitions of the happiness equation in terms of what fun is, a state of escape, really, a state of pleasure and joy that allows you to forget about your troubles for a while. And what happiness actually is, a state of calm and peaceful contentment that makes you okay with life as it is, to understand also what unhappiness is. And that's extremely important because, remember, happiness is the absence of unhappiness. If we can remove the unhappiness, then we can find back our innate default state as a child, which is happy. But before we do that, I'd urge you to take a few minutes now with paper and a pen and write down a list of escape activities, of things that you find in your own life that you're escaping to instead of finding your state of happiness. So, find if you have any habits of when I feel stressed, I go and do A, B, and C. Maybe I have a couple of drinks, or maybe I binge watch something on TV, or maybe I go to, do this or that. Write those down so that you can observe them, so that when you look at them as escape methodologies, we learn together how to replace them with calm and peaceful methodologies. For now, let's write down your escape list. And when you come back, we'll talk about what unhappiness is. What then is unhappiness? If you look at the happiness equation, unhappiness is the difference between events and expectations when the events of your life seem to miss your expectations, when life is not going your way, when you want something to happen, but what happens is different. If you look at it this way, unhappiness then becomes a survival mechanism. It truly is a fire alarm. It's your brain using your sensors to look at the world around you and within you and decide that the state you're in is not the optimum state for your survival, for you to thrive, for you to succeed, whether socially or physically or in whichever way. When your brain decides that your current event is not the optimum state as per its expectations, it alerts you in the form of an emotion. And it alerts you in the form of an emotion because it normally speaks to you all the time and you never listen anyway. So a negative emotion like, regret or shame or unhappiness or worry or anxiety or fear, all of those negative emotions are there to alert you that something is not right. Something is not what your brain wants life to be. Now, in that sense, unhappiness then is a good thing. Think about it. I mean, you'd want to be alerted when something goes wrong. The problem with unhappiness is, unlike a fire alarm, when our brains tell us that something is wrong, we don't react the proper way. How do you react when a fire alarm goes off? If the room you're in right now has a fire alarm and it starts to go off, what will you do? First, you will observe, you'll acknowledge that there is a fire alarm. You will leave the room. You will verify if there is a fire. You will take action. That is not what we do with unhappiness. When we feel unhappy, say when your partner says something hurtful on Friday evening, what you do is you first sit and dwell on it. Then you wake up Saturday morning and you say, remember that event from Friday, 4 p.m.? Play that again. Torture me with it. It's almost like the Netflix of unhappiness. It's unhappiness on demand. It's like, I saw that horror movie and it scared me so much. Let's play it again. On Sunday, you become the director. You add more drama to the movie. Oh, it must be because he or she doesn't love me anymore. On Tuesday, you say it's because I'm bored. And that means on Wednesday, I'm going to spend the rest of my life alone. When you really think about it, there is a very big difference between the event that triggered your negative feeling and all of that suffering you've built for days, weeks, and sometimes for a lifetime afterwards, which is not the event at all. The event happened and it ended. You got the fire alarm so that you do something about it, but instead of doing something about it, you dwell on it and dwell on it and dwell on it with only one benefit, which is for you to suffer. How intelligent is that? How intelligent is it that if a fire alarm goes off and then it's finally silent, you take your lighter and put it against it so that it makes the noise again and torture you? Why do we do that? We do that because there is a very big difference between pain and suffering. And when you really understand, pain comes from outside you. Pain is an event that is imposed on you. You cut your finger, and the reason why you are feeling the pain is because something changed, something affected you. But when you look at biological pain, there is no way whatsoever that you can actually remember how you felt when you cut your finger when you were 6 years old. When the reason for your pain goes away, the pain goes away. As soon as your finger heals to the point where you don't need protection anymore, you don't feel the pain anymore. That's not the case with mental pain, emotional pain. Mental pain and emotional pain are states where you have the ability, the ingenuity of humanity to regenerate the pain over and over. To tell yourself, oh, hold on, when my partner broke my heart, that's the external event. By saying something hurtful, I can now remember that. I can generate it again and again and again, and I can torture myself with it. As you do that, you forget the main reason why you're doing that. The main reason you're doing that is like a fire alarm, like a survival mechanism. Your brain is unable to accept the situation. It doesn't think that this event meets its expectations, so it wants you to do something about it. Now, in all of that, by the way, your brain is not your enemy. As a matter of fact, those feelings are generated within you because your brain wants what's good for you. It wants you to do the right thing so that you get rid of the reason for the pain, and so life becomes better. Life meets its expectations. The reason why it regenerates pain on demand is because we don't respond to what it's telling us. I mean, imagine if you had a friend, and your friend, you know those friends that are super excited when they get something that they want to tell you. They'll text you and say, hey, call me. I have something I want to tell you. And then it's 4 a.m. in the morning or something, so you don't see the message. And then by the time you wake up at 7, there are 15 messages in there. Like, why didn't you call me? Call me. I have something to tell you. I'm really, really excited. There's something very important. By 8 a.m., if you didn't answer, they'll get upset and they'll shout louder. And like, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Are you alive? Can you please call me? And so by 8, you text them and you say, hey, I just woke up. I have a meeting at 9. Can I please call you at 10? And they'll go like, yeah, 10 is okay. And they'll shut up. Not even the act of calling them, just the promise that you will call them will calm them down. Now, that friend is very much like your brain. It's very much like your brain saying, hey, by the way, we need to talk about that hurtful incident on Friday. And instead of you talking about it, doing something about it, you let it linger. Now, within neuroscience, we call this incessant thinking. Incessant thinking is your brain constantly bringing the same thought over and over and over. 4 a.m. in the morning, 6 a.m. in the morning, in the middle of a meeting, when you're with your friends, it just takes you over, and it keeps happening over and over and over because your brain thinks it's important and you're not responding. It's a survival mechanism. It won't stop until you start listening. And so what is the answer? The answer is to stop the incessant thinking and do deliberate thoughts, deliberate thinking that is attempting to solve the problem, attempting to make things better, or at least attempting to acknowledge that you heard what your brain is saying so that your brain can move on and say, okay, we're going to talk about this later. I have a friend of mine that literally talks to her brain when her brain brings up topics that are annoying her in the middle of the day, and she will say, okay, brain, I heard you. We're going to talk about that at 6 p.m. And believe it or not, if you do that with your brain, if you acknowledge that you heard the problem, that you intend to talk about it at 6 p.m., you will actually get a break until 6 p.m. Now, how do you talk to your brain when it's complaining that way, when it's alerting you as a fire alarm, is really a skill. Because when you understand that your brain triggers unhappiness for your own good, then you might as well accept, and most happiness practitioners, by the way, accept that unhappiness is part of life. That if you're not feeling unhappy or concerned or worried sometimes every now and then, that you should actually think to yourself, am I not observing the world around me properly? Is there something that I'm missing? But at the same time, when you talk to those happiness practitioners and ask them, is it okay to feel unhappy? They'll say, yes, sure. It's okay to feel unhappy, but it's not okay to linger in unhappiness. It's not okay to turn the pain into suffering. Now, we're going to talk about a technique that I call the happiness flow chart. Because since I started to use that technique, my unhappiness, most of the time, not all of the time, sometimes, of course, deep issues may trigger me to feel unhappy for an hour or a day or maybe a few days at a time. But most of the time, most of my unhappiness will disappear when I use that technique within 7 seconds. 7 seconds from the moment I feel unhappy to the moment I find my happiness again. I call this the happiness flow chart. Yes, as an engineer, I tend to build a process for everything. We're going to discuss that in the next conversation, but for now, I'd like you to create a list of what issues do we want to use that technique on. I would like you to take a minute or two, maybe 10 minutes or more if you need to, and just write down the things that you think about incessantly, the things that keep you up at night, the things that seem to keep recurring over and over, the things that seem unresolved. There are things that your brain wants to bring to your attention. Let's bring them up to the forefront now. Write them down on a piece of paper, all of the things that you're thinking incessantly about. When you're back, we're going to take 1 or 2 of those and go through the happiness flow chart to show you how we can address the trigger of the pain and get rid of the suffering. If unhappiness and all of those other negative emotions are just a survival mechanism, they're your brain's response to the happiness equation, comparing events to expectations, realizing that the event doesn't meet your brain's expectations of an optimum place for survival and thriving, if you want, and so alerting you in the form of an emotion, then perhaps by responding to that kind of survival mechanism, by actually addressing it like we would address a fire alarm in a systemic way, maybe then we can take the unhappiness away. And so as an engineer, I try to systemize everything that I do, including my approach to happiness. Whenever I feel a change in my emotion, and it's important to recognize those changes because the modern world somehow tells us that unhappiness is a reasonable price to pay for your success. It's fine to be unhappy. We become numb to those feelings of unhappiness. We deny feeling them to others, and accordingly, we deny feeling them to ourselves. And so I encourage everyone to acknowledge the emotion. As a matter of fact, celebrate the emotion. If you feel that something is off your norm, it's important to recognize it so that you can act upon it. The example I always give is health. If you feel a little bit of a sore throat, what you do is you immediately acknowledge it. You don't deny it to yourself. You tell yourself something's not right, something doesn't feel perfect, and accordingly you do something about it. You take some vitamins, you rest for the day, whatever it is to get back to healthy. That is because healthy is a very important state for you to survive and to succeed in life. Similarly, when you get a negative emotion, you should allow yourself to acknowledge it and say, something doesn't feel right, I'm off my balance, and to acknowledge the fact that happiness is also your optimum state for survival and success. When we think about those who are happier being more engaged or more alert and excited about what they do, more loved by people around them, that by definition gives them a higher chance of success. It's almost as if your duty, if you want it to be successful, is to be pleasant and calm and peaceful and contented all the time. In which case, the first step to dealing with unhappiness is to acknowledge that you feel unhappy, to ask yourself, what is triggering this emotion? You know, your brain will normally tell you something like, my partner doesn't love me anymore, right? And when our brains tell us stories, they don't always tell us the truth. They normally tell us what they think is the truth. So they would take an event like Friday evening and a bit of an argument with your partner, and the conclusion they would offer you is, my partner doesn't love me anymore. And that is a very good reason for unhappiness. Now, once you found that thought, the happiness flow chart consists of 3 questions. From the second you find the thought that's triggering your unhappiness, to the conclusion of the happiness flow chart is checkmate. You'll go back to happiness every single time. The 3 questions are, is this true? Can I do something to fix it? And can I accept it and make my life and the life of those I care about better despite its presence? Now, let's go through those one by one. The first question on the happiness flow chart truly, most of the time, gets rid of 99% of unhappiness. Your brain will tell you something that often is not true. I may even dare say your brain has never ever told you the truth. It always just tells you what it thinks is the truth, which in a way gives you the right to actually debate and drill deeper and verify if what you're being unhappy about is even worthy of your unhappiness. So the first question to ask is it true? If your brain tells you, my partner doesn't love me anymore, then you say, okay, provide me evidence for that, brain. And I will also ask you to provide me evidence for the contrary. I love my daughter to bits. She's wonderful in every possible way. She's a big part of my life. And, you know, one day I was visiting her when she lived in Montreal. She texts me in the evening and says, Papa, come tomorrow in the morning. I'll make you your favorite breakfast and we'll have a good time. Okay? Kiss, 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 hug, 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 and lots of wonderful emojis. I wake up in the morning, I text her, I say, baby, are you awake? She says, yes, I have your pancakes ready and your favorite milkshake. Bring your own coffee so that I am, I'm not the best at making coffee, so we have a wonderful time. I show up, we have an amazing time. We're eating things we love, we're laughing, we're sharing, memories and experiences. I'm asking her opinion on things. And then comes a topic around, is it good for the world to have tens of millions of songs on Spotify, or is it not? Silly question, really. For her as an artist, this is a wonderful enablement of creativity. For me, as a happiness expert, I think too much choice sometimes gets in our way to find happiness. And so we have a bit of an argument. And it happens with your loved ones. You argue sometimes. And so it gets a bit heated. I walk out of her apartment and I say, baby, I'm going to go get another coffee, calm down, and then we can talk about this. As I walk out, my brain tells me, Aya doesn't love you anymore. And I kid you not. I stopped in the middle of the street and I out loud said, what did you just say? How can you come up with this? How can you make such an assumption when she sent me all of those wonderful emojis? She cooked me breakfast. She hugged me on the way in. We were laughing for an hour. And then we had an argument, brain. What evidence do you have for that assessment that can destroy my life? And so often we make conclusions. Our brains presents what it thinks is true in a way that is mostly negative because it's a survival machine. There is no benefit that your brain sees in telling you the good news. It wants to tell you what is wrong because it wants to alert you that there is a possibility that something is wrong so that you can act upon it. Now, when I asked my brain, how can you say that? My brain honestly was like, no, hold on, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I mean, like, there is something wrong. Can we please talk about it? Now, the problem is this. If we believe that assumption made by our brain, we are ripe for hours, days, or a lifetime of unhappiness sometimes. But when we ignore it, or even better, ask our brains to correct it, we find a path to dropping the majority of the noise that's happening inside our brain. So the first question of the happiness flow chart is it true? Is what you're telling me true? I mean, you're giving yourself the right to upset me, brain. At least is what you're telling me true. If it isn't true, drop it. If it is true, then we move on to question number 2. And question number 2 is the best of all questions. What can I do to fix it? I mean, think about it. Your brain is alerting you that something is wrong, that events are not meeting expectations because it expects you to engage and make things better. So what is the answer? The answer is, how can I fix the situation? What can I do to fix it? Think of sometimes economic crisis or market changes or whatever are making your business struggle a little bit. So your brain will tell you something like, our business in the next quarter is going to struggle because of A, B, or C. Now, you take that through the first filter. Is it true? Yeah, and it looks right. It looks that your customers might be saving a little bit. It looks like your product is not the most ready in the market. And now you're thinking to yourself, I have a challenge ahead. Now, the challenge is true. Question number 2 is, what can I do to fix it? What can I do to fix it is a very interesting question, because if there is something you can do to fix it, there is no point whatsoever dwelling in sadness and suffering. Instead, the right thing to do is to actually engage in fixing it, right? Can you, call your clients and maybe change your payment methods? Can you, innovate something in your product? Can you cut your costs a little? Can you advertise differently? Can you do something about it? Yes, it is true in the absence of action, but your suffering is not going to fix it. So you might as well simply tell yourself, what can I do to fix it? A simpler example, because maybe the first example doesn't apply to everyone. You're stuck in traffic and you think you should arrive at 6 p.m. or you wish you would arrive at 6 p.m. But now that you're stuck in traffic, it looks like it's going to be 10 past 6. You can do one of 2 things. You can either suffer the entire way, tell yourself that you should have planned better, tell yourself that you're the unluckiest person in the world and that the world is against you to get you stuck in traffic, or simply pick up your phone and look at, maybe Google Maps or something and see if there is a way you can get out of it. Is there a way where you can maybe get out of the car that you're in and just take the, public transport and it will get you there faster? Can you, maybe get out of the car and walk and it would get you there faster? If there is something to do to fix it, do it. Because once you start fixing it, 2 things happen. First, you're no longer caught in incessant thoughts because you're now away from that, default mode network thinking, and you're into problem-solving thinking. And as you're problem-solving, you're no longer suffering, you're actually engaged. But even better, if you manage to fix it, the problem itself will go away, so your brain will stop alerting you that something is wrong. So question number 2 is, the minute you feel that your brain is making you suffer because of something that is true, is to say, can I fix it? If you can, go ahead and do it. At least plan to do it. And if you cannot, then that becomes the Jedi master level of happiness, which is, what can I do about things that upset me that I cannot fix? Well, I'm stuck in traffic. I look at my maps and there is nothing I can do to get there faster. What is the action when life throws challenges in my way where I cannot actually fix them? And the answer is found in question number 3. Can I accept the event as it is and do whatever it is that I can to make things better despite its presence? So with question number 3, your brain moves from the only state of happiness is a state where life gives me exactly what I want, and if it doesn't, I'll fix it so that it gives me what I want, to what can I want that is better than where I am now? Okay, that might not exactly be what I wanted in the first place, but that actually makes my life better. Now, the traffic example is simple. So you're stuck in traffic, you cannot find a way to get there faster. Pick up the phone, call the person that's waiting for you, and tell them, I'm really sorry, I'm stuck in traffic, I'm 10 minutes late, should I, continue? Would you be okay to wait for me? By the way, no disrespect at all, or would you like us to reschedule? When you've done that, you've taken a situation that you couldn't fix. You cannot take the traffic away, but then you made your life and the life of the person waiting for you better as a result. And those go all the way to even the deepest of unhappiness. And I say that, and I'll share with you my personal story, because I think it really, really matters to understand that life is bound to throw challenges your way that are actually not fixable. It's part of the design of life itself that some things will not go your way. Now, of course, the example for me was my son. And when my son left our world, unexpectedly, medical error, at a time where he was at his prime. This is the time where a father is proudest of his child. And death has a finality to it. There's nothing you can do to bring him back. The challenge with death is that when you lose someone you love, they're gone. There's nothing you can... I could hit my head against the wall for 27 years, and then on my deathbed, Ali would still not be there. When you realize that life sometimes twists your hand, you twist your arm that way, and basically tells you this is it, the answer is found in committed acceptance. Committed acceptance is to be able to tell yourself, look, when my son went into the operating room, my life was here, the highest point of my life. He was tall, he was handsome, he was loving, he hugged me in a way that really, really made me feel that life was right. This is what I wanted. 4 hours later, my life goes from here all the way to the bottom. One of the worst, lowest moments of my life. I lose the one that I love the most. Now, committed acceptance is to say, but he's gone. You know what, life? I hate you for doing this. My heart hurts for missing him, but I can't change it. I can't bring him back. So I will accept that he's gone. But I will not stay at this lowest point of my life. This is not going to be my life till the end of my life. I'm going to do something today, tiny as it is, to make my life a little better than yesterday. And then tomorrow, I'm going to do something tiny as it is to make my life better than today. And after tomorrow, better than tomorrow. And when you look at my story, as Ali left our world, I just don't know how I ended up choosing to write down what he taught me about happiness, put it in my first book, Solve for Happy, which became an international bestseller. The original mission was 10 million happy. We achieved 10 million happy. Then we went for 1 billion happy. And we keep making a difference as a small team to millions, tens of millions of people around the world. Now, believe it or not, that still doesn't bring Ali back. He's still not here. But my life, the life of people that I love, and the life of so many has become better after his loss. It doesn't bring him back, but it sort of makes me feel that it wasn't for nothing that he left. Massive difference when you realize that acceptance, believe it or not, is not a choice. Believe it or not, if I resisted for 27 years, Ali's still not back. I accept that by definition that I cannot change it. But commitment is what makes all the difference. Commitment is what makes you say, I don't expect to be back here anytime soon, but I expect to make things better and better and better. And then over time, if you ask me today, I will tell you openly, despite losing Ali, despite the fact that I miss him every single day, it's still the happiest day of my life. The happiest day of my life is to be able to live a life of meaning, triggered by what he taught me, triggered by what he made me become when he left. To be able to talk to you today and tell you that when life twists your arm, you can accept. It's not a sign of weakness. As a matter of fact, it's the sign of ultimate strength to recognize the new reality and say, all right, I can take that, okay? And then commit. And as you commit, life becomes better and the unhappiness goes away. It really sounds very logical, but applying the happiness flow chart is not a natural skill. It's not a natural skill for a very unusual reason. Some of us don't grow older than being 6. And I say that with a ton of respect, by the way. We've always been there. We somehow remember the time when life did something that missed our expectations, or our parents did something that missed our expectations, or our friends did something that missed our expectations, and all we did was cry. All we did was complain. And then somehow in the middle of the crying, someone showed up and said, hey, baby, don't cry. It's fine. Here is your chocolate. When you grow older, that doesn't happen anymore. When you grow older and events miss your expectations, I'm sorry to tell you, it's up to you to fix it. So when events miss expectations and you're triggered with that feeling, it's your responsibility to ask 3 questions. Is it true? Is what my brain telling me even worth me being unhappy? Can I do something to fix it? Because if there is something I can do to fix it, I might as well do that instead of dwell in unhappiness. Or can I accept and make my life better despite its presence? Take that happiness flow chart now and please take the list of things that you're incessantly thinking about and put a little bit of time. I would say a lot of time if you want to, but take one of those topics that you're incessantly thinking about and start to ask yourself those questions. Is it true? Is what my brain telling me true? Can I do something to fix it? Can I accept it and make my life better despite its presence? Take them one by one. This is not a process that you can resolve overnight. And even the first one that you will take, your brain will resist and keep trying to convince you that it's true. Right? So put in the time to find out if it's worth your effort. If it is, fix it. And if you can't, live a better life despite its presence. It may not come as a second nature first, but the more you use the happiness flow chart, the more it becomes part of the way you do things naturally. And that is the time where it goes back to what I told you the last time we spoke. 7 seconds is all you need. Is it true? Can I fix it? Can I accept and commit? 7 seconds is all you need, and 99% of your unhappiness will go away. Of course, there may still be things that might be difficult for you to overcome, but the more skill you gain with the happiness flow chart, the more you will realize that life really fades down to challenges coming your way and you going through those 3 questions. Go practice it now, and I hope it becomes your second nature and that you will always find your happiness as a result. The more you get used to using the happiness flow chart to find happiness, the more you recognize something quite interesting. You go through the happiness flow chart and often change your mindset, change your emotion, when nothing in the real world might actually have changed at all. You may go and say, what can I do to fix it? And decide on a plan on what you're going to do, but you haven't really executed the plan yet. You haven't really fixed it yet. The world hasn't changed yet. And somehow your unhappiness goes away. I mean, think about it. Even if you use the thought to change the situation, without that thinking process, you would have remained unhappy. I want to dedicate our conversation this time to understanding thought, understanding how thought gets us to where we end up being unhappy, being regretful, being shameful, but more interestingly, how to deal with thought, how to make thought your ally rather than the reason for your unhappiness. And so I want to start with a bit of an exercise. I call this the blank brain test. It's going to take us maybe a total of 5 to 10 minutes, but it will solidify within you the impact that thought has on your unhappiness. To do that exercise, I want you to first take a few seconds to maybe close your eyes, cleanse your palette, of thoughts. Just try to lose any attachment to any thought that you have right now. And then I want you, and I apologize for asking you to do that, to actually think about something that upsets you. The exercise is made of 2 steps that need to be done concurrently. The first is to think of something that upsets you. Think of it so deeply that you get that feeling of anger or shame or sadness. Feel it within you. And then when you're done with that, we will show you here on the screen. We'll give you 10, 15 seconds to find that feeling. And then we will show you here on the screen some falling circles that are falling on the screen. You don't have to worry about all of the colors other than white. I need you to count the number of white balls that will show up on the screen. At the end of the exercise, success will be that you actually count the number of white balls on the screen, and 2, that you remain unhappy. You stay within that negative feeling that you managed to trigger with remembering that event. So let's do this together now. Close your eyes, take a few seconds to cleanse your palate, then now think of something that makes you unhappy. Hold on to that unhappy feeling. Really, really reflect on it and make it feel as real as the day that event happened. And now open your eyes and count the white circles on the screen. As you count the white circles, remain in that negative state that you triggered with your thinking. All right, so if you are like all of us humans, you came out of this exercise with one of 2 things. Either you managed to stay unhappy by focusing on that event that triggers your sadness, but failed to count the white balls, or you actually counted the white balls, but somehow ended up not being able to remain unhappy. This is very typical for most of us because most of us are unable to do 2 things at the same time. We can either focus on counting the white circles or white balls, or we can focus on the thought that was triggering the unhappiness. Now, when you really think about this exercise in depth, this exercise was what we refer to as a full cycle simulation. A full cycle simulation is if I want to reverse engineer a machine, I take it from one extreme of its operation all the way to the other extreme and then back. That way, I can see a full simulation of how the machine works. So your mental machine was in a good place. We were sitting here, we were chatting about unhappiness and happiness, and you were paying attention. Nothing was really triggering your unhappiness. Let's call this T0, the moment at T1, before anything started. T1 is a moment where I told you to focus on something that makes you unhappy, and your brain, within seconds, you tell your brain, bring me something that makes me unhappy, and your brain jumps on the opportunities. Like, I have 200 of those to tell you about. Which one should I pick? When I got you there, that was the other extreme of your state of happiness and unhappiness. I got you to that other extreme, and then I simply distracted you by showing you white circles on the screen. When I show you white circles on the screen, what I actually did is I stopped your brain from focusing on that thought that was triggering your unhappiness. Now, I have a couple of questions to ask you. Has anything in the real world actually changed between T0 and T1? I mean, let's think that you picked the example of my boss doesn't want to give me the promotion I want. So that triggered your unhappiness. Was that not true at T0? Was it not true at T2? Your boss didn't want to give you the job at T0, just as much as he or she didn't want to give you the job at T1, just as much as he or she still doesn't want to give you the job at T2, which really triggers the most important question. Honestly, what's the only thing that changed between T0 and T1? The only thing is you started to think. Your unhappiness was not the result of an event that just popped out of nowhere into your life at T1. The only thing that happened at T1 and made you unhappy is that you started thinking. The minute I distracted you with white circles on the screen, you stopped thinking. And as a result, you went back to happiness. You went back to a calm and peaceful contentment. The topic of your boss is not on your mind anymore. Which tells you one thing that is extremely important about happiness, that it is not the event of your life that makes you unhappy. It's your thoughts that make you unhappy. In the absence of negative thoughts, there is no feeling of unhappiness within you. We trigger the unhappiness with those incessant thoughts. What does that mean? It means that if I can control those thoughts, just with white circles on the screen or maybe with other techniques, then I can get rid of the unhappiness when it's unwarranted and unnecessary. To be able to do that consistently, we need to understand two things. One is what we already discussed, which is why do we think? We think because thinking is a survival mechanism. It's trying to attempt to make us safe all the time. But the second and more important question is, who is thinking? You see, in the modern world, we glorify thinking so much that we almost associate our very own being with that process of thoughts. Descartes, the French philosopher, coined that statement that completely almost governs our modern world, which is, I think, therefore I am. It's not that, I think as part of my life. I think as the definition of who I am. And that, when you really think about it, is actually wrong. Back in 1920, a Russian Nobel Prize winner, Lev Vygotsky, was actually awarded the Nobel Prize for the research that he did on what he used to call the internal dialogue. He observed that when we are thinking inside our head, we actually move our voice boxes a little bit, or ever so slightly, just in the same way that we do when we speak out loud. In his mind and his theory, he attempted to say that when we are children, the first way we understand the world is by using words. So we start to narrate the world to our parents. We say, oh, this is a plane, and this is milk, and this is... And we keep doing this until it becomes awkward. And when it becomes awkward, we internalize that dialogue within our heads and continue to narrate the world to ourselves in the form of words. MIT, back in 2007, did a study that was extremely supportive of that argument and very, very clear in its understanding. They put participants in MRI machines and they gave them word puzzles. And as they gave the participant a puzzle, they could observe the problem-solving areas of their brain lighting up for as many seconds as needed to solve the problem. And then, interestingly, the problem areas of the brain would stop lighting up, would stop firing, and then the verbal association area of the brain, the one that I use to speak to you out loud right now, would start to fire up for up to 8 seconds, and then the participant would know the answer. Their explanation was very simple, that first the brain solves the problem, and then it takes up to 8 seconds to turn the answer into words so that you can actually hear it inside your head. That basically means your brain is literally talking to you. Now, it doesn't take a lot of science to prove that. When you really think about it, you have to start asking yourself a few questions. If the voice inside my head was me talking to me, why would it need to talk? If the voice inside my head was me talking to me, I would instinctively know what it wants to say. The reason why it talks is because it's a third party. It's a different entity. And when you see it that way, you start to understand that thought in itself, believe it or not, is just a biological function. It's like your heart pumping blood around your body. It's a biological function. It's there to make you live. It's there for your survival. Huh? Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I am the blood being pumped around my body. We don't identify ourselves with that blood. And yet, we wake up in the morning and we identify ourselves with that biological product of our brains. Glorified as they are, our brains are a 3-pound lump of tofu that is producing concepts that it observes through its sensory instruments, if you want, and turns them into words, the only building block of knowledge that we understand after starting to speak, and so that we can understand those concepts. When you see it that way, you recognize that it's not I think, therefore I am. It's I am, therefore I think. As a matter of fact, it's I am, therefore my brain thinks. Once you know that, the whole game changes. Because for most of us, most of the unhappiness we feel is a result of that annoying machine telling us things inside our head. And if you think that this annoying machine is you telling you what to do, you have to listen and obey. But once you create that separation, that the voice inside my head is a third party. It's even not a full third party. It's just a biological function that acts like a third party. You can suddenly create that separation, which means you don't have to obey. You don't have to identify yourself with it. If your brain tells you a thought that's naughty, that doesn't make you naughty. If your brain tells you, to do something, you don't have to listen to it. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to agree. You can simply go back to that brain and say, give me evidence otherwise, right? You can actually not even listen. You can tell it to shut the F up. Simply, you can tell your brain, I don't want to talk about this topic. And when you create that separation, suddenly thoughts become within your control. I call my brain Becky, and I do that deliberately to create that image of a third party, as a third person. And, it was a funny story because when I explained that separation between me and my brain to a friend of mine, a week later we were having coffee and she said something really, not reasonable. And I said, where did that come from? And she said, Becky told me. And I was like, who's Becky? And she said, Becky, my brain. And I said, why'd you call her Becky? And she said, because Becky was the most annoying girl in school. The one that always told me things that made me feel unhappy about myself. So I borrowed that approach because now when my Becky tells me something annoying, I can simply say, Becky, prove it. Becky, I don't like it. Becky, I disagree. Becky, I'm not going to do this. Okay? Or Becky, go bring me a better thought. And I think being able to tell your brain to bring you a better thought is the absolute game changer. It's that separation of, I'm not going to do what I'm told unless it actually makes sense. When your brain presents you a thought, you are in control. Now, most people will say, but that's not always the case, Mo. When I'm upset, and my Becky brain is talking to me about something, I'm not really within, control. My brain is in control. And I say, yeah, remember the time when you were upset about something, you dwelled on it all through your commute to work, and then you arrive at work, and your boss says, where's the report I asked for yesterday? What do? You normally will put everything down. You'll tell your brain, okay, we're not going to talk about this anymore. Where's that report? You're capable of doing it. Nobody's ever told asked their brains to tell their right arm to go up. And then the brain said, no, I'm going to move my left foot. Your brain does exactly what you tell it to do, but you have to tell it to behave in the right way. You are the boss. Your brain does as it's told when it's told. If you had the ability to tell your brain to do whatever it is that you want it to do, what's the smartest thing you should ask for? You should ask it to make you happy. You should ask it to bring you happy thoughts. And the way I do that is through something I call the deal. This will be the topic of our next session. It's the thought, not the event, that makes us unhappy. If you can change the thought, most of the time you'll change your state from unhappiness back to happiness and calm and peace. So if you can do that, and we can do that, we can actually tell our brains what to do. What should we tell our brains to do? We should tell them to bring us thoughts that will make us happy. Now, I summarize that in my relationship with Becky, with my brain, in a very simple agreement. Believe it or not, just to have fun with it, I drafted that agreement and pretended to sign it and let Becky sign it as well, my brain. And so the agreement is very straightforward. Not all thought is bad. Sometimes when you listen to a meditation teacher that will urge you to control your thoughts, to bring your brain down to calm by observing your breathing, you may wrongly think that the exercise of meditation is against the idea of thinking. It's not. Meditation is an exercise that trains your brain to come down to calm, so that when you need to bring it down to calm, so that you can actually analyze a problem or work on a topic, that you have the ability to do that. It's the exercise of trying to give you the capability to bring your brain back to calm. But meditation in no way actually advocates that we should not think. If thinking is positive, then think away. Think as much as you can. As a matter of fact, I always will say, if thinking is good for you, it's not making you unhappy, it's solving your problem, it's making your life better, then think as fast as you can. Now, how do you make sure, though, that you are thinking thoughts that are good for you? The deal is very straightforward. My brain is allowed to think only one of two types of thoughts. It can think a joyful thought or a useful thought. Every other thought is not allowed. And by having that clarity in my deal with my Becky, I am allowed at many, many intervals in our relationship, when she brings me a thought that is actually making me suffer, or when my brain starts to talk about something that's useless to me, I can actually tell Becky and say, bring me a better thought. We have a deal, and the deal is joyful thoughts and useful thoughts. Let's take an example of each of those. When my son Ali went to the hospital to have a very simple surgical operation, it was an appendix inflammation that basically took his life. The first thought that came to my brain after Ali died is one that stems very much from being a parent. And the ego, the role of a parent, is to protect his children. And so the immediate thought that my brain launched into is, you failed your role. You should not have taken him to that hospital. You should not have taken him to that hospital. That's a thought that can torture me for the rest of my life. And when you really think about it, my brain, once again, is thinking that something is very wrong. I took Ali to that hospital, and Ali left our world as a result. That is a very, very wrong situation. And so it's trying to correct it, even though I do not have the ability to correct it. You should have taken him to another hospital. It took me around 4 to 5 hours of real struggle and suffering until, because I'm trained on using the deal, I shouted almost out loud inside my head, really, really telling my brain, I heard you, brain. I heard you. You want me to go back in time and take him to another hospital. I cannot do that anymore. I don't have a time machine. I do not have an ability to go back in time and take him to another hospital. Besides, what good is that thought? If you know I cannot fix it, why are you telling me this? What can I do with that thought? Go back and bring me a better thought. Bring me a useful thought. It took my brain quite a bit of time. attempting every now and then to bring negative thoughts, and eventually ending up in a place where it started to tell me, what if we write down what he taught you about happiness, we put that in a book, we share his essence with the world so that the world remembers how wonderful he was? Would that be a better thing to do with my thinking? And I said, yes, absolutely. That is a useful thought. That's a thought I can act on. That's a thought I can affect. I can use that thought to make a difference to me and to others. The thought you should have taken him to another hospital tortures me. The thought you can make the world remember him by sharing his essence is a thought that empowers me, something that I can do, a useful thought. The second type of thought is actually quite difficult to even consider when you've lost a loved one. A joyful thought when you lose someone that you love. I mean, all of us know that losing a child or losing someone near to you is the hardest thing we ever have to go through. And so, today, even, several years after Ali left our world, I still feel the pain of losing him. I miss him. And so every week I wake up 3 to 4 times a week and my brain reminds me, my brain says Ali died. It doesn't want to move on from that thought. It remembers that thought. And I understand and I respect that. Something very wrong happened to my brain. My son left our world. And so when my brain tells me Ali died, that's a very painful thought. When my brain says Ali died, I remember the time when he was in the intensive care room where I was not able to do anything, the stress that I felt when he was going through it, the fact that I cannot hug him anymore, that I miss having him in my life. It's a very painful thought. And it took me quite some time to actually learn to reverse that thought. To reverse the thought of Ali died into a joyful thought is almost alchemy when you think about it, but it's not once you know how. When my brain tells me in the morning Ali died, I acknowledge it. I say, yeah, I know, brain, I wish he didn't, but Ali also lived. Ali lived is a thought that comes from the same fabric of Ali died. It's the same canvas of his life. But Ali lived is a thought that brings a ton of joy. It's a thought that reminds me of all the jokes we joked together, all of the books we read together, the music we played together. It's a thought that triggers my brain to remember the video games, the conversations. It is a thought that reminds me of his hugs, not the absence of his hugs. Now, Ali lived as a thought is a joyful thought. It's a thought that gets me to recognize what most of us miss about our life. When something is taken away from us, we have that ability to focus on the negative, on what's wrong, to bring an incessant thought that truly tortures us. When in reality, Ali lived, believe it or not, was not because of anything I deserved or earned at all. When I remember that Ali lived, I remember that Ali came to our world unplanned. We didn't expect to have Ali. That I didn't really deserve. I didn't do anything before Ali arrived into our world that makes me sort of deserve this wonderful soul that taught me so much, that showed me how to be happy, that really, really got me to understand what life is all about. I didn't earn that. And all of that joy was given to me by life. And yet my brain chooses to focus on when Ali left, not when Ali lived. Every thought that will ever come to your brain is a thought that has two sides to it. There's always a joyful thought. And when you allow yourself to consider that a joyful side to the truth always exists, when you allow yourself to consider that if I was given the choice, I would always choose that Ali lives, even if I have to suffer the pain of Ali died. I would choose to live that story again and again. It's a blessing that Ali lived. The joyful side of the truth is the side that our brains choose to ignore. But the joyful side of the truth is a side that is as truthful as the negative, painful side of every truth. And if you choose to focus on that, then the thought itself brings you joy instead of happiness. The event is exactly the same, but the way we think about it is what makes us happy or unhappy. The deal is very straightforward. I tell Becky, anytime you think, you're allowed to think a joyful thought or a useful thought. Any other thought is not allowed. And if I notice another thought, I openly tell Becky, I heard you, go bring me a better thought. You may think that this is witchcraft or magic, that nobody's capable of doing that. And I will tell you openly, without training, nobody is ever capable of doing that. Because you see, our brains are exactly what we train them to become. In neuroscience, we call that neuroplasticity. It's perhaps the best kept secret about how to train your brain to find happiness. Let's talk about neuroplasticity in our next session. So you hear me talk about things like the happiness flow chart and the deal and other techniques we will discuss in this conversation, and I make them look simple. And, sometimes people tell me that doesn't sound right. These are, difficult habits that one needs to develop. And I agree, they are neither simple nor are they difficult. The level of competency you have in performing those techniques that lead to your happiness depends entirely on how skilled you are in managing those techniques. And, when you look at a gymnast or an athlete performing some incredible feat of fitness on screen or in a field of competition of some sort, you tell yourself that this is impossible. It isn't really. It's a matter of how much and how hard they trained to get to that level of fitness. And so when we humans attempt to build our muscles, we go to the gym, we exercise, we sort of stretch ourselves a little bit. We make things a little more difficult than what our muscles are capable of doing. And as a result, our muscles develop. Similarly, inside our brains, inside our heads, contained within that skull, the more you perform certain tasks, the more you stretch yourself a little, the more you become better at them. It's almost exactly like going to the gym. Neuroplasticity will develop your mind and the way you think in ways that can either be good for you or be bad for you, depending on which exercises you will perform. Now, it's easy to understand how to develop fitness with your muscles. You can see it visually. If you go to the gym 5-6 times a week and you constantly lift heavy weights, you are bound to eventually look like a triangle. If you go 5-6 times a week and squat, you'll look like a pear. You can visibly see those changes. When they happen inside your head, though, it's not that visible. And neuroplasticity actually works both ways. Good habits that you practice frequently will actually become easier. You'll become better at them. Similarly, bad habits that you practice frequently will also become easier, and they'll become second nature for you. They'll become the go-to that you actually rely on every time you do something. The example I normally give about that is negative news. If you watch the negative news every day of your life, you wake up in the morning, you switch on your news channel, and you hear the same sequence. Some politician, did something outrageous. The economy is struggling. Your life is going to struggle as a result. Some violent happened somewhere, and then eventually they say, oh, and by the way, a penguin kissed a cat, so that you can get yourself out of your chair and perform the day. That constant sequence, day after day after day, is reminding your brain that the world is not a safe place, that the world is not a good place, when in reality, the world is not that awful at all. There are more people that are not violent than there are people that are violent. There are more partners that kissed last night than those who were reported on the news because one of them hit the other on the head last night. And that idea of building certain habits, building certain understandings of the world, building certain comprehension of how life actually is and how you deal with it, are really a choice of what you choose to do more and more of. Neuroscience will tell you that neurons that fire together wire together. So if I simply take the act of tapping my finger on a table and I just keep tapping every day for half an hour, a few weeks later, you'll be one of the best in the world at finger tapping. Simple as that. You know, it's a very simple activity, but your brain says, it seems that this is a skill that I need. So I'm going to wire together the neurons that are needed for that activity to happen. If you had a choice to wire together your neurons, you need to wire them together for happiness. You need to start taking out all of those negative habits that you have in your life that make you feel unhappy, thinking about negative things, criticizing, complaining, watching negative news, watching horror movies, watching violent movies. All of those kinds of activities and many, many more are constantly training your brain to find out what's wrong with life. It makes your brain think that there is more of what's wrong than there is right. And remember, the happiness equation was basically saying it's events minus expectations. Once we become alert to something and we start searching for it so that our brains reaffirm their belief, we are more likely to find it. If we tell ourselves that life is bound to send a challenge our way, we're going to be looking for every challenge that is possible. And as we look for challenges, we will find more challenges, which will reaffirm our belief that life is challenging, and then we will look for more and look for more. If we tell ourselves, no, life is about to throw something amazing my way today, we will look for amazing things. We will find more amazing things, which will affirm our belief. And so accordingly, we find more amazing things. It's that mindset. It's that vision of how the world goes that defines how we see it. When we apply neuroplasticity to happiness, I found that true happiness practitioners actually have habits that train them how to develop those good neurons, good connections, if you want, over and over and over. And those habits I grouped together in 8 useful habits that I normally summarize under one word, which is the GYMM. GYMM, which is GYMMMMMM. These are habits that deserve you to go to the gym every day, the mind gym, the happiness gym, every day, to practice them over and over, so that the more you practice them, the more your brain is wired to be more prone to happiness than you are to suffering. So what is the mind gym? The mind gym is be grateful, the G, yield is the Y, then meditate, be mindful, meet your brain, mind your own business, make belief, and connect to Mother Nature. Let me take you through those and give you some tips so that you become your own personal trainer. Take yourself to the mind gym and become more wired for happiness.